Votre présence ce soir est très précieuse pour nous. Seeing all of you here, so many faces that are dear to us, reminds us also of those we love who are not here with us, those who have walked with us in love and trouble, as Alice Walker puts it, whom we carry with us in our hearts. Je porte une robe rouge ce soir en commémoration des femmes et des filles autochtones assassinées et disparues, et en condoléances et solidarité avec leurs proches. The violence perpetrated against Indigenous women and girls is rooted in a long history of colonial violence and genocidal practices against their peoples. Yet in the face of that sustained and ongoing violence, Indigenous communities are still here, asserting their cultures, reviving their languages, and working it out together. Their connection to the land that sustains us all runs far deeper than colonialist assertions of territory. Nous sommes reconnaissants aux gardiens de cette terre ancestrale jamais cédée, never surrendered land, et plus particulièrement au peuple Ganyen-Garaga, the Mohawk people, et aux autres peuples autochtones qui ont fait de cette terre la sienne, dont les Algonquins, Anishinaabeg et Huron-Wendat. We are thankful for the elders and for the younger generations to come. Nyawen Gawa, Chimegwech, Tia Weng. Merci. J'aimerais aussi reconnaître l'appui du gouvernement du Canada dans le cadre de cet événement pour célébrer nos 32 ans d'existence. We'd like to express our thanks for the Government of Canada's support for this event. We would also like to thank Carmen Delia from Espace Nox, Denis Ducharme for sound and light, and Richard Dirado for his video recording tonight. Merci beaucoup. We are here tonight to celebrate resilience and change. Nous sommes réunis ce soir pour fêter notre capacité d'affirmer notre magnifique diversité, to celebrate our tenacity in asserting our individual and collective truth, our vision, our gorgeous diversity, pour contrer les effets de la violence, to recall history and fight the rise of racism and white supremacy and exclusionism in all its forms, to honor all who are two-spirited, non-binary, LGBTQ, third gender, pour soutenir nos sœurs musulmanes et d'autres minorités racialisées qui sont particulièrement visées par la nouvelle loi 21 sur la laïcité. We are here to imagine the creativity and solidarity of diverse communities living on a planet not pillaged for profit. Montreal Serai began as a magazine in 1987, when electronic typewriters were just starting to be used. Yes. Notre responsable du graphisme, Lisa Foster, qui est à la table d'accueil, elle se souvient très bien de l'époque où elle coupait et collait les articles et les images littéralement avec des ciseaux et de la colle pour faire le montage de la revue. Oui, ça c'est l'engagement. Our original moniker, New Arts, New Communities, eventually morphed into bringing the margins to the center. and by 1995, the review was fully digitized. By 2010, our magazine had published more than 400 writers, artists, and poets. We had reviewed and displayed the works of installation artists, filmmakers, musicians, painters, and we'd interviewed local and international personalities. Aujourd'hui, en 2019, nous constatons que les marges dans lesquelles nous avons opéré dans les années 80 sont du passé. Nous sommes sur la scène, au centre, et la diversité et l'acceptation ne sont plus des paroles dans l'air. Today we want to propose a new outlook that goes beyond bringing the margins to the center, where center stage is no longer exclusionary, and we share it with artists and writers from the majority community with a common understanding and struggle for change. Nous poursuivons nos efforts d'accroître la diversité dans les arts, de lutter contre l'appropriation culturelle et de promouvoir des changements qui reflètent le mélange grandissant de peuples et de cultures à travers le monde. For tonight's celebration, some of Montreal's best-known spoken word artists and performers have agreed to join us in our continuing battle for social justice and change. Avant de commencer, je vous invite à fermer vos cellulaires. If your cell phone is still on, now would be a good time to turn off the sound so you don't accompany the performers. I would like to welcome Ian Ferrier to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this great party for this amazing magazine. I was so happy when Rana invited me to come do this. The piece is called Emma's Country, and it's from a book I did called Coming and Going. The swish and roar of cars carries up from the coast road. But the cars are few and far between, and things seem simple in Emma's country. Breeze blows through the windows at night, soaking the forest walls of the attic. Walls that enclose the visiting daughter and her lover aged 22. Emma whispering hush as the bed creaks, and they both giggle laughing, shy because her mom and dad and grandma sleep below. When they moved in here, the plants beneath the skylight cascaded wildflowers, filling the air around their narrow bed, as if it was their fault it bloomed. And nothing softened the noise in the silent dark. Though in the intervals, between the words in talking, behind the sound of crickets and at the bottom of all hills, the ocean was never still. Her dad's a fisherman, sired 3 daughters, though even the youngest is 6 years gone. Formed the United Fishermen in the 50s, a co-op that still serves this coast, though no fish left, and the Cove, a ghost town where his kids were born. And when they return to that cove, Emma holds her boyfriend's arm so tight, it's as if the ground had crumbled beneath her feet, as if she were falling, as if her childhood had fallen away. of the ocean pours past Newfoundland. Soaking the Gulf with salt water and life. And Emma, a girl who played along these beaches, saying, "Daddy, will you take me out on the boat tonight?" And he said, "Well, grab your jacket and a life belt too. We'll take the skiff out and see what's biting tonight." And her boyfriend, that was me. Paraded before Mom and Grandma and Dad, who did not say 10 words to me the first 3 days I was there, before opening up in a flood of stories, the copper history of his life engraved on those nights. World War II and the fall of Singapore. Japanese jailers and dysentery starving him to half his weight. Before the blast. And the months waiting to be shipped home. And the years waking at 3 a.m. and by dawn far out on the water fishing. There's a photo I saw in black and white. He's standing on the side of a hill with Valerie and Emma wrapped around his legs, colt-like and pretty and neither more than waist-high to him. And he reaching one great hand down to each of their shoulders. Hands creased from hauling 200 feet of line down and up all day. He holds them safe against the wind. And now the wind has come up even stronger, blowing his hair straight back and his face cast as if in bronze. And she says, "Daddy, will you take me out on the boat tonight?" And he says, "Oh no, not this night, Emma. It's too black even now. And by morning, just you watch it blow. And isn't that the night a wave shatters the wheelhouse? And they're running from the wind, torn from the Gulf, thrown 300 miles, halfway to Prince Edward Island. Her dad's gone now. Died starved for oxygen in hospital in Montreal. The daughters all have children of their own. Emma and Valerie's both in high school. What is there in a photograph that the soul and force of a man's eyes burn through it even now? A girl could fall 23 years through time, feel her dad's hand rough against her shoulder. For 1,000 years people have fished this coast. When we return to that cove, Emma holds my arm so tight. It's as if the ground had crumbled beneath her feet, as if she were falling, as if her childhood had fallen away. Thank you, and congratulations to Montreal Serai and everybody who put that together. And yeah, onward.
I will read something that relates to change, the circular nature of time and the repetitiveness of change. Plus ça change. Encounters and missed encounters. Johnny boy, let's get things straight. History is just a shuffle, or maybe a tango. One step forward, one step back, and if you hit a wall and fall down, your whole life changes. For example, if the neighborhood drunk happens upon the lips of your best buddy's girlfriend, wow, you don't even want to find out. Remember Katrina? No, not the girl from high school, but the hurricane that hit New Orleans. A cold front hit a warm front. It all happened in the high seas, but the scuffle landed in New Orleans, and it uprooted a bunch of trees, houses, animals, and souls. And when the god Aeolus and the god Poseidon got tired of dancing around, everything quieted down, but things were never the same again. Many coffee-colored folk lost their little homes, their garden patches, and the will to play the saxophone. A cold wind blew all the way from Washington and dispersed them all over the country. But yes, sirree, those suits from New York jumped on the chance to reconstruct this lovely old port that used to reek of rum and gumbo, and where love was sung in Cajun French. New Orleans now is no longer what it was. Johnny boy, or should I say Tijan? Here in Quebec, we've also had historical encounters. A guy called Jacques Cartier sailed in through the St. Lawrence and bumped into the Micmac. But like a good Christian, he planted a cross on the ground and claimed it for the King of France, in the name of God, of course. The problem is that the English then sailed in and did exactly the same thing, but not resorting to faith and the cross, but to a sword and lots of cunning. Which is why we'll soon celebrate La Fête Nationale and Canada Day within a week of each other. Recently, Queen Elizabeth turned 93, and she celebrated her birthday in grand style. She wanted her subjects to forget that the empire where the sun never set had long ago reached its twilight years. It was one of the largest empires in modern history, but nations like to have their own little flag, their national hymn, their language, and their borders. Of course, you have to get along with your neighbors to be able to sell them plains in summer and buy from them mangoes in winter. After World War II, many countries started breaking away from the yoke of powerful empires, but their leaders understood the value of alliances, such as the United Nations, the non-aligned countries, the capitalist countries, the communist countries, the third world countries, and so on and so forth. But it all came tumbling down with the Berlin Wall. Every so often, the G7, or is it the G8, or the G10? Whatever. These gentlemen's clubs, with a lady or two wearing pantsuits, meet in remote locations far from the madding crowd. After all, you wouldn't want your suits to get soiled with the sweat of all those unwashed masses. One of those men always wears a blue suit and a red tie, and he often says, "You'll see." He says that to everything. And then back in his plane, he tweets that he has changed his mind after all. What can I say? Missed encounters amongst politicians are often more painful than lovers' spats. Hey, Tijan. Hey, Johnny boy. Let me stop here. The history of humanity is long and messy. The earth spins around its axis and circles other round bodies. Half of the time, the sun shines, the other half, darkness reigns. They say at some point the sun will stop shining. But you and I, Tijan and Johnny Boy, will no longer be around to see these changes. As I said at the beginning, life is a shuffle, a tango. One step forward, one step back. You find your step, and then you stumble down. Thank you very much.
So the first poem is called Word Awakening, and it's for Oliverio Girondo, a poet I've translated. He picks up words in his hands wherever he goes, examines them, turns them over, rubs them softly between chafed fingers, trying to feel and imagine what their ancient life was like before they drifted to the bottom of forgotten linguistic seas and later emerged encased in verbal sediment. He delicately removes the dust of the unaware every day, chips away years of encrusted banalities, the plaque of platitudes, scarred shibboleths, repeated insincerities, hidden hypocrisies encrypted in their sides, stripping them down carefully till each one, even the most common, shines with original intensity, washes them in mountain streams that restore their luminous immediacy, awakens them from their barnacled existence and brings them back to consciousness, freed and glistening with the histories of roots and connotations. He meditates on each of them as he lifts them up and breathes upon them, infusing energy as he resuscitates, moving calmly between inanimate and animate, and burnishes them as the sea polishes pebbles on unpopulated shores, each one shaped and smoothed and waiting to be used as if for the first time. As primeval as the other words, he invents, mixing them with the grout of prefixes and suffixes and cognates to create phonemic utterances that take meaning from suggestion, fusion, sonic resonance, sifting out agate words and garnet red-tissued living stone, bone words arranged in fossil skeletons as from the earliest spoken times, preserved in ossified marshes and river sand. He speaks them, chants them, intones them, inscribes them on clay tablets, papyrus, parchment, paper, screens, horizontally in new patterns for connecting bare radiance, or organizes them as drawings or geometric constructions or parts of paintings, with their own arrangements and rhythm and enunciation, an unheard language spilled out into the air, now rising at different inclinations and angles, ever more multiple and vertical, in intersecting lines and towers, planes of words in outlined shape and form, speaking and murmuring among themselves in clusters, swarms, constellations, caricatures, and clouds, verbal maps to imaginary places and vocalized chords, never heard or seen before, that recombine, forming unnamed, now named entities that go on creating themselves across untimed dimensions, with unexpected interactions, connections, and distances, building, incanting, engineering new shamanic structures, new skeletons of creatures born of odd and unforeseen combinations, word buildings, word animals, word birds, word bugs, word whales, word worms, word moles, word worlds, word songs, word flutterings, babble beings returning from before the age of Ur, word fields, word tales, words and words and words that come from the uttermost marrow, transmitted along endless networks of veins, human lips, tongues, eyes, and minds awakening.
And the second poem is called Temples, and it's for Jeanette. We walked together through the temples of Khajuraho, lost in the dust of the plains of the Yamuna, the sides of the monumental stone pinnacles sculpted with scenes of sexual union in dozens of positions and combinations. Gods or people bending, embracing, coupling elegantly, and apsaras attending, helping them hold their positions, twining around pillars or simply looking on, combing their hair, glancing into mirrors, smiling or bemused as the deity couples bonded, converging in Maituna to achieve tantric transcendence. Uniting, transmitting, spontaneous selves, fusing, adoring, blending duality into a single being. Returning to the act of creation in search of ecstatic catharsis, pulsation through pleasure, their faces focused serenely, joyful, smiling, lovingly, joining together to be transported to new worlds, becoming one within the other in the completion of the universe. All from the 10th to 12th centuries. And as we left, you stopped to adjust your sandal, just like an apsara, removing a thorn from her feet. And that night, we felt it possible. And like them, we combined our bodies and beings, making love in those same positions and feeling closer than ever before, together, alone in the vast night of India, journeying on until Surya, the sun god, would awake and pick us up once again and carry us off to the coast of Orissa in his 24-wheeled chariot to the temples of Konarak, which had similar statues doing similar things, carved out into sides that were once 60 meters high. And later, that one last temple visit to a place of living pilgrimage near Land's End at the tip of Tamil Nadu. Ramanatha Swami, with a giant seething gopuram rising abruptly above the seashore palms, and its hall of 1,212 massive pillars supporting a vast green and orange ceiling of tigers and mandalas, all leading to the center of activity, the great basalt lingam of Shiva, rising out of Shakti's enfolded yoni, where women with flowers in their hair anoint the smooth stone with sacred butter sprinkled with petals that runs down its fluted sides and pools into the lips of the awaiting circle. And that night, we held each other forever, our temples touching. And a last poem, The Highway of Tears. I know that highway myself. Used to hitch it east and west years ago when I taught high school in a mining town, at the dead end of a dirt road that ran north from it, up to a reserve. And then the prefab village across the lake, from the raw-bitten, stripped-off earth and giant rock-gorged machines gnawing away the land, inhabited, unchanged, for 8,000 years. There was a tavern, but no stores. So I had to hitchhike down the road and then out along the Yellowhead, another 50K to a larger town with a supermarket, every 2 weeks to get food and carry it home in my backpack. All year long, in January in the dark at 25 below, and June in the endless daylight. One cold, rainy afternoon, I got a ride with some people from the reserve, and we picked up a woman they knew, whose face was beaten and bloody. She didn't show her pain, just said she wanted to go into town. Occasionally I'd see girls hitching along there, but didn't know what might be happening to them, the ghosts they could become that haunted the dark, impassive pines where they disappeared. Perhaps they were the older sisters of my students, or just students themselves, or they might make it down the highway and survive for a long moment to take a place among the women on East Hastings Street in Vancouver, who left shadows on the barren, wet walls along the bleeding asphalt before they faded away in solitude or were taken to places of no return. And some might have been able to go back to their homes in the north or west to mourn the ones who never reappeared and forever ask where they had gone. Disappearance often worse than definite death, because the families and others never know for sure, no matter how long they wait, always wondering, hoping. And the women who were once children with laughing eyes, trying to find their way, are struck down or vanish unseen. The invisible women, the murdered women, the lost women, the lonely, scared, brave, trusting women, loved and never forgotten by the voices asking, where? Thank you.
I'll be reading from Faith's Instruments, and the occasion is a birthday party, and you'll see. Wendell said, looking at each of us in turn, "You guys," meaning Jay and me, "speak with an accent. Where are you from?" That question always gets my hackles up. I looked at Jay. He was moving around the room with a tray of canapes. "Jay, here's a question for you. Where are we from?" "I mean, which part of Africa are you from?" "Oh, I can answer that, but first, why do you want to know?" All eyes on me. "It's just that my family has a long involvement with Africa." "Don't most white people?" Gina said. "Not sure what you mean." "I'll give you an example. The development you Westerners brag about was financed by the slave trade. I didn't learn that." "How's your family involved with Africa?" Gina asked. "Oh, my parents have a carved ivory tusk that my great-grandfather brought back from the Boer War. One of his brothers even stayed behind and acquired a farm in Rhodesia." "You mean Zimbabwe?" Gina interrupted, but Wendell ignored her. One of his brothers even stayed behind and acquired a farm in Rhodesia." "Sorry, you mean Zimbabwe?" Gina interrupted, but Wendell ignored her. "My uncle's descendants are still there. Papa follows African history very closely." "What does your father do?" Emilia asked. "He's an investment broker. He thinks that all those civil wars in Africa come from them getting their independence before they were ready." He stopped talking. No one said anything for a while. He resumed. "Did you see that documentary in which the rebels in Sierra Leone were chopping off people's hands and feet? Gross." "Guess what?" Gina said. "They learned it from the Belgians." "Oh, come on. Who is the historian here, you or me? It's one of the techniques the Belgians in the Congo used to force the Congolese to go out and collect rubber sap. You know what that rubber was for? The burgeoning automobile industry. Bet your father doesn't know that." "I don't believe that." Emilia chuckled. "So," Wendell turned to me, "which part of Africa are you from?" "The diaspora, St. Vincent." "I thought that was a Caribbean island." "It is, and it's also Africa. Didn't Columbus call the Americas India?" "Oh, come on, you're from the West Indies." Everyone laughed. Wendell frowned. "We're talking about the islands, right?" "You mean those near Kingston?" I said. "No, I mean like Jamaica. Is it? I mean your island. What is it called again?" "St. Vincent." "Is it independent like Dominica?" "Yes," I said. "I took a trip to Dominica when I visited Guadeloupe last year." Total silence. "What a difference in the standard of living between Dominica and Guadeloupe. Man, Dominica is like something still in the Stone Age." I bristled. What's the connection between Dominica being in the Stone Age, to use your term, and your father's pro-apartheid stance? You're aggressive, condescending grin. I saw some of the most gorgeous men ever in Dominica. He kissed his fingers. They smelled like the earth, pungent. He breathed deeply. I like men who don't wear deodorant. Wow, lean brown bodies. My head spun. He whistled. Ooh la la. Were you wearing a loincloth? Gina said. We laughed. Emilia and I exchanged glances. We knew the rest of the narrative, even the use some blacks make of it. I recall this guy at Concordia telling a group of white males that blacks will conquer the white race between their legs. They bristled and crossed their legs. Can't help it, Wendell said. First guy that did me was black. Shoe polished black. I am not kidding. Awesome. I was 17. He was 20-ish. Forgot his name. Had this strong perspiration odor. Now it turns me on. I'd sneaked him into my parents' basement, and we did it. You should see what he had on him. He put his hand on his chest and inhaled slowly, followed by a loud exclamation. Emilia giggled. Since then, I've been hooked. Man, if it ain't black, it won't track. Like my line, I score with it every time. I go to New York 3 times a year, March break, Pride Week, and New Year's, and head straight to the gay bars where black men congregate. Haven't found one yet, like my first pickup, but I'm still looking. He stopped talking and looked at each of us in turn, assessing us or deliberately trying to shock us. Blacks don't have a monopoly on size, Tyrone said. How would you know? He glanced at Tyrone's left leg. Tyrone walks with a limp. I hear there's this organization here, Arc-en-Ciel, for black guys. You guys belong to it? He looked at Jay, then at me. We didn't respond. You know if they allow whites to join? He was now staring at me. Jay had returned to the kitchen. I shrugged. Must be mostly Africans. He's so macho and austere. Won't mind checking them out. Awesome, man. You won the lottery on the first shot, Gina said. Fancy that. People play all their lives and never win. You win on the first shot and you want to win again? You're greedy. He frowned. Robert Mapplethorpe is dead, but Philip Rushton's alive. He'd be able to help you, Gina said. Is Rushton black? We laughed. Does he have a big cock? That's for you to find out. He certainly thinks he has a big brain, and we'll show you have one too, Gina said. She got up, nodded to Emilia, headed into the kitchen, and said something to Jay. What? You're joking, Jay said. She came from the kitchen, went into Jay's study, and returned with her and Emilia's jackets. Jay came to the living room and stood there, looking distraught. Gina hugged him and whispered something in his ear. Hey, Wendell shouted, that's not polite. Fuck off, Gina told him. Emilia and Gina left. The living room was quiet. Did I say something wrong? Wendell broke the silence. No one answered. I think I put my foot in my mouth, he said, frowning. He went to the bathroom. When he came back, he too put on his jacket and left. The party became something of a wake afterward. The 8 of us who remained tried to revive it, but it was futile. Thank you.
I'm going to read a few short poems from my collection, beginning with what I call my Cli-Fi poem. In it, I contemplate what it would be like to be the last person left in Montreal. Predeceased. You climb the escarpment, once baptized Montreal, now stripped of trees and scarred by random piles of rubble, rivulets of molten ash, where pathways lay. You're old enough to recollect streams of hikers, skiers, cyclists, with jackets bright as neon sky. How long has it been since sunlight, since snow? You stumble to the summit, sit with time and pain, to reflect that you're the last to know. There was once a cemetery on the western mountainside, the headstones pulverized, then the coffins plundered. After seismic heat gave way to cold, and they ran out of books to burn. No funerals anymore. Nobody. Nothing left to bless. Not a flower to love on this planet. Before memories effaced, that's what you regret most. The unceremonious waste. So here's a poem that I stole the idea from a John Ashbery poem. John Ashbery wrote a poem called They Knew What They Wanted, where every line was a movie title. But instead of movie titles, I took song lyrics, fragments of song lyrics, to build a poem that speaks to the culture and colossal failures of the generations who came of age in the 70s and 80s. It's called Aquarians. We chain smoked Camel cigarettes. We got beach tar on our feet. We put a candle in the window. We believed there'd be an answer. We looked at the ivy on the old clinging wall. We learned where the grapes of wrath are stored. We requested, amor por favor. We were so good with words. We watched your every breath. We planted love and let it grow. We rocked you gently with our song. We cried for Argentina. We got a shirt that we really loved. We bought, oh Lord, a Mercedes-Benz. We found a place to stay and a place to go. We got stuck in traffic, not moving anywhere. We booked a one-way ticket to paradise. We watched you standing by the ocean's roar. We hated that sadness in your eyes. We felt nothing but a heartache. We were very superstitious. We went down to the river to pray. We tried to find a reason to believe. We saw fire and we saw rain. We remembered when Rock was young. We tried to relax and take it easy. We squandered our resistance. We saw the damage done. We didn't draw the Queen of Hearts. We didn't all call the tune. We didn't really give peace a chance. We didn't celebrate the blaze of light in every word. One stone, the dagger, lance, and sword, the bayonet and musket, the whip and hangman's rope, Molotov cocktails and revolvers, the pistol, semi-automatic, drone, B-52s, AK-47s, F-16s, RPMs, and WMDs, short-range launchers, fully loaded Humvees, mushroom clouds, neutrons and atom bombs, Katyusha rockets, Cornet and Zelzal missiles, canisters of Agent Orange, mustard gas, hydrogen, plutonium, uranium, helium, landmines, and hand grenades, gas chambers, firing squads, barbed wire, cattle prods, electrocution, guillotines, poison, IEDs. Lob this discourse of the vicious. Let it self-destruct. reuse the fuse to light a way with beacons made of gentler words. So here's my last poem. It's a happy birthday to Montreal Serai poem. It's from probably going to be in my next collection. It was inspired by my visit to the Mapplethorpe show at the Musée des Beaux-Arts a few years ago. There was a display that I found really intriguing with audio of albums that featured Mapplethorpe's cover art. You know, I think we all know Patti Smith's famous albums. But there was another album there that intrigued me, the 1980 album called Sugar, Alcohol, and Meat, that featured something called the Dial-A-Poem Poets. And it's a happy birthday poem to Montreal Serai. Here's to the continuing battle for change. The Dial-A-Poem Poets. Please feel free to pretend the well-heeled junkie William S. Burroughs is reciting, his voice not exciting, very segregation south, genteel white male. Do feel free to imagine you've redialed up or down, and now it's Allen Ginsberg, John Cage, or even Patti Smith as you hold the receiver. Remember that thing? To your ear, feverish with rage that you're here on this island far from the flower power and dissent. So it's all up to you, to little old you, to fight the good fight. Feel at liberty to say, those were the good old days, when poems connected moral imperatives and millions, not hundreds, showed up. And things got done. Yes, they did. Things changed. Feel free to dial up and have a listen, or better yet, buy the album, Sugar, Alcohol, and Meat. Just don't lord your nostalgia with the gloating lecture on subversion, how we've missed the boat to redemption. There's much to change, and time, like the poem, is running out.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you for the invitation to read tonight. It was given so long ago in the midst of the horrible winter. I can't believe we're here and we're doing it now in the summertime. I have lived in Quebec for 48 years. The other 14 years were spent in Toronto. There, from the age of 26 to 40, I pursued many different occupations in the arts and other occupations which supported my work in the arts. And every year at Christmas and in the summer, I would drive home to Quebec to visit my family. And at the age of 40, I returned home for good. Home for me is not Montreal, though I lived here for 4 years after graduating Concordia. Home is that little bit of off the West Island that was unilingually English when I was growing up. Hudson, a population 5,000 then and now. And when I returned in 1997, I lived in, and still do, Hudson's neighbor, the mostly bilingual St. Lazare. I mention all this because one of the suggested sub-themes for tonight's presentation on change was to include some Montreal content. And Montreal, for me, is somewhere I went to school on a tight budget, living at home in Hudson with my parents. And then I inhabited Montreal for most of my one early and doomed attempt at matrimony. Like some of you, in the early 1980s, I lived in the Plateau. Though that name for the area was not used yet, at least by my cohort of then 20-somethings. I lived on Park Avenue at Saint-Viateur, above a laundry run by a Turkish Armenian and across from Club Soda. Believe it or not, on $200 a week, we were able to live quite nicely and save enough to move to Toronto and set ourselves up there before we ran out of love and money. Actually, I hated Montreal. Coming from my first 22 years of life in Hudson, with a horse in the backyard, dogs and cats, trails through fields, and a forest behind the house. This country mouse was terrified by the anonymous subway crowd, by surly bus drivers, by the rock through our apartment door window because we had the wrong sticker. Yes? Or was it no? Oui ou non? During the 1980 referendum. I watched it all and I didn't like what I saw. I couldn't wait to get out of the place. My sister moved to Calgary, my brother had moved to Vancouver. I and my then husband would try Toronto. So Montreal for me meant painful memories of politics and of personal and professional failure. Now for some poems. Some of them were first published in Montreal Serai. War Measures Act was written from the safety of more than 40 years after the fact, but the emotions it describes are still fresh. War Measures Act. Waiting on the sidewalk outside the Five and Dime, after a happy 20 minutes with China dogs and horses, a slightly larger girl calls me maudit anglais. When Mum comes, I ask her what it means exactly, but I'd already gotten the general idea, wiping spit from my sleeve. So a few years later, when we passed tanks on the tea can, on the way to a film for my 14th birthday, and in Westmount see soldiers standing guard in driveways, giving away the locations of very important people, I understand who they are coming to get. One hate-filled little girl after another. The next poem also was written sometime in the last dozen years, far from the time of the actions described, in the serenity of St. Lazare. On Park Avenue. The Zen walker walks today as he walks every day, slowly. He is perfectly aligned, at least appears to be, as alternately his hands squeeze the air. He is a boxer, and, I hear, a junkie. And this is his regime. The long, slow walk, the opening and closing fists, a papaverine center. Perhaps he is undefeated, I don't know. He is the ocean liner moving by, we smaller ships afraid to go too near, yet curious about his destination. I am no longer afraid to travel on the subway, though I usually don't have to use it during rush hour. And some poems have come to me there. Beggar, Namur Station. The women come down the stairs like wet flowers. They watch their feet, their heads bent like dripping flowers. He sits near the bottom of the escalator, inhales the scent of moist flowers. As they come, some raise their eyes, and their lips prepare to curve like soft flowers. And they notice he is blind as a flower. Montreal, I am still watching you, your people, perhaps with a more tender eye than I did in my youth. Supermarket, P9. We approach the cash. The she-male, pushing 6 feet, has narrow, hairy arms and a flat bum, and is almost there. She has a gentle face, sad and calm, and needs a 2-inch dye job along her part to keep me guessing at her age. But she is spending the money on sacks and cans of dog and cat food and kitty litter instead. Without our pets, we'd be savages, I pretend to say. In my mind, address her thin back, her spaghetti straps. The last poem, McDonald's 32nd Avenue, Lachine, was written sitting in my car waiting for my daughter when she and her soccer team were enjoying the ice cream after a game. They'd lost again, but the coach was kind enough to treat them anyway. McDonald's 32nd Avenue, Lachine. Now night, and off the curving yellow arches, the light, usually so harsh, glows dull in summer's haze. Moths leave it alone, cavort with brighter street lights. Cars move slowly, their noise softened. Songs drift by, salsa, reggae, and quiet voices. Even the motorcycles, summer's lords, are muffled. Inside, under a strong white light, white women sit, examine prospective customers. Outside, a dusky terrace where black kids lounge. Across the street, people disappear down a dark lane next to the used car lot. A scary little guy with 2 giggling girls, a couple on a scooter, a man with a dog. A fat old man wears a slender nasal lifeline with resignation, become a hybrid, battery and oxygen powered. He parks his electric wheelchair near my car. I turn the key to check the time and the headlights play on the thighs, smooth and hairless, of a girl on rollerblades. Passively, she glides. Her boyfriend on his bike smiles, his arm around her waist, and tows her back to their place. It is a night, the critics might say, of lyric intensity. Applause that we come out and make the scene, and with our flesh, that we are here, and here, there's ice cream. Thank you.